Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and Gamefound over the next week. If you're new here, we do this every single week, but before we get started, I do like to go over some news and announcements that I just found out about. I don't have a whole lot this week, but I do have one big one, and that's that there is a new version of Inish that was just announced. This is going to be launching sometime in 2025. I'm guessing sometime around April, but there isn't a whole lot of info out on this yet. But if you're not familiar with this game, this is one of the three big area control games, with the other two being Kemet and the other one being Cyclades. I haven't played Inish, so I don't have a whole lot of details on the gameplay here, but there are quite a few videos out already. So if you do want to learn more about this one, you can go ahead and check those out. But of course, I will dig into the details and let you know exactly how it plays and how this new one differs from the previous one during the week of its launch, so make sure to subscribe down below and I will have you covered. Other than that, I do always want to give a quick mention to Alex over at Boardgame Co. Number one, because him and I do work together keeping track of all these upcoming campaigns, and I do these every single week, but he puts out a video at the start of each month going over the entire month, and then you know of the heavy hitters for that month. I also want to mention him because he is running a convention here in just a couple weeks, and if you do want to attend that, you can go ahead and find tickets to that in the description down below. I will be attending along with many other people from the community, and if you do want to learn more about this one, Alex did put a video on his channel, and I did also post a video myself going over a lot of the same details, but just giving you a little bit more of my perspective. And that's everything I got for an intro, and this one is going to be a bit of a shorter video because we don't have too many games to cover, but let's check them out. And the first campaign we have launches on January 20th, and this one is called The Treasure Ship of Zheng, and this one is a competitive worker placement exploration strategy game that is based on the Chinese explorer with the same name. The game plays over 7 rounds where players are competing to try and have the most victory points at the end of the game, and you're going to be doing that by exploring the different seas, gathering resources and rare animals from different islands and locations, and you're going to be using a polyomino system to fit all those animals into your ship, but then you're also going to be fighting any pirates that you meet along the way and trying to build up your diplomacy with the surrounding areas. Most of the players' actions are going to be taking place at the different ports along the main map, but there are a few other boards that are used in this game depending on which phase you're currently in the round, and the first phase does use a different board because you're going to have a diplomacy board which is full of a bunch of different official cards that are all randomly assigned at the start of the game, and they all have different powers and resources that they can grant you. And in the first phase, players are going to be placing their offering token onto one of those cards. The officials that are higher up on the tableau are also considered higher ranking officials, and these are normally more costly to use, but these will also push you up in the turn order for the following phase. This phase also uses a board that I don't have an image of, but it's just going to have 6 cards face down on it, and players are going to be taking turns placing one of their ship tokens onto one of those 6 different route cards. The cards further to the right do represent further distances traveled, and those can come with additional benefits, but the leftmost card is the one that's going to be going first. So whoever chose the leftmost card, you're going to be revealing that card, and then that card's going to dictate the number of ships that you get to place, which I'll come back to in a second here, but also any special effects that are going to come into play, like putting pirates out onto specific ports. And this is where things get really interesting because the number of ships that you get to put into play, you're going to be putting onto the main map, and you're going to be starting from your starting location and then putting those ships one by one in adjacent spots until you have placed all your ships. The final ship you place is always going to be your flagship, and you get to take the action of whichever location you put it at, but then all the other players can choose one action from any of the other ships you just placed. If there's ever a pirate at a location where you want to take an action, you can't take that action until you either bribe that pirate first or fight that pirate by spending the appropriate amount of weapon tokens, but that will also gain you additional reputation. Locations can have all sorts of actions that you can take, like either granting you with resources or allowing you to trade in resources for other resources, or they might have the option to pay resources in order to raise your diplomacy or your reputation, or they could grant you with victory points or victory point multipliers for the end of the game. Once you've taken the action at the location of your flagship, you'll then also have the option to build a monument there, and these are really fun because if you choose to do that, you can actually take that same action that you just took over again, and this also has a cascading effect, so if you've previously built monuments in adjacent locations, you'll be able to take those actions as well. This brings you to the end of your turn where you'll be able to take one final action, and for this action you can choose any other ship that you have on the board and then take the action of the port it's located at or any of the ports adjacent to it. The round continues through each of the other players, allowing them to flip up their card, place their ships, and take their flagship action, and any optional actions until each player has had a turn, and that's going to be wrapping up that round. But I did mention a few tracks that you can move up, and as you move up those tracks, those can also grant you instant bonuses as you move over different icons there. And I did mention a polynomial system when you do gain animals, and I also don't have an image of that, but as you gain these animals, you're going to be placing them onto a board with limited spaces, and you're going to gain the benefits of any icons that you cover up. You're also going to be gaining victory points for any spaces that you cover up, and then an additional victory point for any spaces within the largest square that you can create on that board. The next round continues with players choosing a new official and then going through the same action phases again, and then the player with the most victory points at the end of the 7 rounds wins the game, and if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. And also on the 20th we have Malediction, and this one is a head-to-head battle card war game, and they do also provide miniatures through STL files, so if you do have a 3D printer or you have access to one, you can just go ahead and print off those miniatures that are associated with each of the different factions. Like I mentioned, this one is a war game, so you're going to be moving around your standees or miniatures out on the board and then taking actions to try and defeat your opponents, and there is also a provided ruler for movement and checking attack distances. The thing that makes this one stand out from other war games out on the market is that this one is also heavily influenced by trading card games, and there's going to be an element of using those cards similarly to how you would in a TCG in order to take your actions or even manipulate battles. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any additional info on the actual gameplay and how all of this plays out, but if that concept does sound interesting to you, feel free to go ahead and check this one out, and I will have it linked in the description down below. Launching on the 21st, we have OrthoGnomes, and this one is a 2-player 3D abstract strategy game where players are going to be placing different blocks, trying to make sure that their color is the most visible at the end of the game. Players are going to be placing their blocks out on the space here, which does also act as a lazy Susan so that you can rotate it around and view the 3D structure from different perspectives. But essentially, players are going to be taking turns placing these columns made up of 3 different blocks, which are each going to have randomly assigned colors on each of the different sides, and players can just place them standing up or place them laying down either vertically or horizontally. Like I said, your goal here is to try and make your color the most visible at the end of the game, and once that is reached, players are going to be counting all the different faces that are visible, and whoever has the most wins. The catch here is that you can never have 2 columns touching each other that are also going in the same direction. So in this image here, it looks like they actually broke that rule because they have 2 standing columns touching each other. And that's pretty much everything you need to know to play this game, and if you do want to learn more about it, you can go ahead and check it out, and I will have it linked down below. And also on the 21st, we have Poland 39, which is a historical war game during World War II. And I normally don't go into the war games in very much detail, so if you do want to learn more about this, you can go ahead and check out Zilla Blitz's channel, which I'll have linked in the description below. And he covers exclusively historical war games. And I'm sure he'll have you covered on this one, but this is a game where one player is going to be playing as a Polish army, and then the rest of the players are either going to be playing as the German or Russian armies. Like I said, I didn't look into the gameplay on this one, but it looks like it's going to be using all sorts of different chips for the different units that you're going to be deploying out on the map to try and defeat your opponents. If this one looks interesting to you, or if you're a fan of historical war games, definitely check it out and check out Zilla Blitz's channel down below. Also on the 21st, we have Tech Race, where players are competing as aspiring CEOs, trying to gain the most victory points as possible through their tech companies. Each player is going to be playing as a CEO with their own special powers, but you're also going to be starting with 2 employees, and throughout the game you're going to be hiring and training workers, and you'll also have to pay them their wages each and every round. But something to note about your workforce is that you can also let workers go in order to upgrade other workers, because someone's got to take on those extra responsibilities. The workers come in a bunch of different employee roles, and each of them will have access or proficiencies in different actions, and they can do things like secure you funding for instant income, attract leads that you can then turn into customers with your sales force, or you could even steal leads from other players. You can hire engineers and scientists in order to research tech and improve your product to raise its overall price. Some rounds also have the players drawing policy cards at the end of the round, where players are going to be voting on in secret in order to put that specific card that won into play, which is going to have some ongoing or instant effects. The game ends after 9 rounds or once a player reaches 100 points, and you're going to be gaining your points from the customers that you've attracted, the profit that you're able to make, but also any completed objective cards throughout the game or introduced through those policy cards. The player with the most victory points at the end wins, and if you want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. And launching on January 23rd, we have Hearts of Iron the board game, which is a historical war game, and I know I just said that I don't normally cover those in as much detail, but I am going to be breaking my rule with this one. First of all, because this one is coming from Steamforged Games, which creates all sorts of different board games and is more known for converting video games into board games, and that is what they're doing here. It just so happens that this video game does have a World War II theme, and also this one doesn't play completely like those traditional war games, and I think this one will cater to more people just within the board game community in general. The players are going to be playing as different powers during World War II, and at the start of the game, you're going to be choosing your ideology as well as your goals for the war, and this is going to allow players to choose those that align with history or to choose something different altogether, going down the path of alternative history. Your decisions here are going to impact how you score at the end of the game, as well as which cards are going to get added to your base deck. This is a game that uses a lot of different trackers and a lot of different cards that are going to be coming into play during the different phases of the round, but at the beginning of a round, players are going to start by choosing an engine card to put into play. This is going to allow you to invest in one of those trackers and move you up that tracker, while also granting you with the associated resources and even granting you with a power that you can use later in the round. After all the players have done this, each player can then choose to reduce their manpower track in order to build factories in regions they control. And I will come back to these factories in a second here. Each player is then going to be choosing a research card to put into play unless they already have one in play, and if that's the case, they'll be able to put a research token onto that card, indicating that they have made progress on it. Each of these cards can grant you with different ongoing and instant effects, but you do need to complete the research on it in order to get that benefit. After you've done that, you're then going to be putting a focus card into play. These focus cards work very similar to those research cards, where they will grant you with some sort of special ability or effect, but in order to fulfill these ones, they're going to have an objective on them, and once you've completed the objective, it's going to grant you with that benefit. Each player can only have one research card in play and one focus card in play at a time, so you do want to try and complete them as quickly as you can in order to get more of those out and more benefits granted to you. After that, players can reduce their production track in order to gain more units of different types, and then they can reduce their manpower track in order to deploy those units out in either regions they control or in regions where they have allies. In order to gain allies, you're going to have to reduce your political power track in order to manipulate your position on the political power board. This allows you to improve or degrade your relationship with other countries, which, like I said, can grant you them as allies, but you're also not able to attack any countries until you have completely degraded that relationship. So you might want to spend political power just to degrade that relationship in order to be able to attack them. After all that, players can finally move their units out on the board, and the way that this works is that each player is going to have a few different movement tokens, and you're going to be reusing these each and every round, and you're going to be assigning them face down to any locations where you have units, and then players are going to be taking turns revealing one at a time, and then moving their unit as many spaces as indicated on that token. Each token allows you to move your units a certain amount, but there is also a token that doesn't allow any movement, which you can use to just bluff the other players. Moving your military through any neutral countries will also impact your relationship with them, so if you do that, you're also going to have to move down negatively on their associated political track. But after players have done all of that, you're then going to be resolving the battles for any locations that have opposing units in them, or any locations where a unit is in an opposing country that they are currently at war with. Battle between units begins with each player rolling a base die and then combining it with the number of units they have in that location. The units and the die can contribute to 2 different attack stats, and players are going to be checking the totals of each of those. And you're going to be able to upgrade your die for each of those totals that you have the most of. This means that if you have the most of both, you'll get to upgrade your die twice, and there are a few different dice offered in this game, of course with the more upgraded ones offering more devastating hits. After that initial step, players are either going to have their base die still or an upgraded die, and at that point each player is going to be rolling the die, and the number of hits on that die indicates how many of your opposing units you get to remove from the board. If there are no units there and you're fighting against the country that you're in, then there's going to be printed values that you need to exceed in order to take control of that country. But after all those battles have been resolved, players are going to be drawing an event card for the round and resolving its effects, and then each player will be able to increase their production for the number of factories and regions that they currently control, and then you're going to be scoring victory points for different regions you control, as well as any objectives you're able to complete. The round tracker moves forward until it hits 1945, which is going to be triggering the end of the war, and then players are all going to be adding up their victory points, and the player with the most at that point wins the game. And if you do want to check this one out, I will have it linked down below. And launch on the 24th, we have Short Circuit, and this one is a competitive game where players are all going to be playing on a shared board, and at the start of the game you're going to be setting up the board with different stacks of tiles that all have different point values on them. The goal of this game is to try and get the most victory points. You're going to want to move around on that board and pick up those tiles, but you'll also get additional victory points if you do pick them up in a specific order. The way the game works is that on your turn you can place up to 3 different path tiles out on the board in order to move your pawn along to those different locations to pick up those point tiles. But one thing to note about placing tiles is that all the players are able to use them. Rather than just placing a tile, you do have a few other options that do allow you to manipulate the tiles already out on the board, because you could either choose to replace a tile with a tile you have, or rotate or remove a tile that's already in play. There are also some other tiles in play that can allow you to draw an action card from the action deck, which can grant you the special bonuses and effects that you can use to augment your turns, and it's the player with the most victory points at the end of the game that wins this one, and if you do want to check it out, I will have it linked down below. Also launching on the 24th, we have Beast Slayers, and this is a game that can be played cooperatively, competitively, or solo, and this is a game where players are trying to gain the most fame. Players are going to be choosing their hero and class at the start of the game, which determines the special abilities they have access to, but then you're also going to be starting with some money that you can use to buy gear, a starting deck of cards, an adventure card which grants you with special actions that can be used anytime during the game, and then also a travel card which allows you to move but also face different encounters along the way. The way the game plays is that players are going to be choosing a contract from the contract board, which is going to have a story, a destination, and a monster that they will find there. Each round, players are going to be drawing adventure cards and gaining power tokens, which they can use to upgrade their hero. Players will then roll 3 dice to determine which cards they get to pick up, and then you're going to be combining your travel cards together in order to create a travel path to try and get to your destination. Once you reach that destination, you're going to be fighting that enemy using dice in combination with your cards in order to modify the outcomes of the battle, and players will be doing all of these things to try and score the most victory points for the end of the game, and the player with the most wins. And you can go ahead and check this one out in the description down below. And I do also want to mention that this one does use AI art, and they do specify that on their campaign page. And that is everything I got for this week, and I think I do have a few giveaways in the queue now, but I'm just going to hold out on doing those until after I've returned from my trips, because I am going to be traveling for the next 2 weeks, and I don't know how available I'll be in order to draw those winners. It also does take a lot more time than it probably looks like to organize and run these giveaways, and I just want to be cognizant of the lack of time that I'll probably have. The giveaways will be back as soon as I return from my trips, and until then, if you are attending the Level Up retreat, that is one of the places I will be during the next 2 weeks. I hope to see you there. Feel free to say hello or to even pull me into a game if you're looking for another player. I just want to play as many games as possible with as many people as possible. That's what the Level Up retreat is all about. It's a lot of fun. Hope to see you there, but if not, until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.
What?